It is an incredible gift to introduce y'all today to Lou Colby and Scott Cook. Getting to work with them this past week as we install their exhibition in the Gilson Gallery has been fun and delightful experience filled with loud belly laughs and fun, silly times. Seeing both Lou and Scott's artwork together offers a really interesting perspective at looking at objects through an existential lens that has an incredible thoughtfulness considering objects and our connection to them in a moment. Just to add a fun outsider observation of Lou and Scott as a pair, is that they're kind of like a Venn diagram where they have a lot of overlaps and extreme polar opposites that support one another that is really special to see with two friends. I think this also comes through in their exhibition as well, where the differences really lift each other up and the similarities strengthen the work even further. I hope you'll enjoy these charming, delightful humans as they share their artwork and artistic journey with us today. So please give a round of applause for Lou and Scott.
Thank you. Okay. This is the microphone?
Mm-hmm.
So if it were pointed down, it'd be okay? Excellent. Thank you for that lovely introduction. So my name is Lou Colby. I serve as foundations faculty at Murray State University. That's where Scott and I met and now work together. And I teach all kinds of classes there, including drawing, studio practice, digital foundations, studio research, but primarily I teach in the printmaking area. It's a fully stocked shop where Nicole and I teach relief, intaglio, lithography, screen printing, bookbinding, which we taught today in our workshop, and all kinds of other fun things. We also have a really great visiting artist program that allows us to bring in amazing artists every semester from all around the country, and that's where Scott and I got the opportunity to meet and work with Stephanie, and so now we're all here together finally. And so we're excited to be connected again and be here on their turf. Okay, so I'm gonna jump right in with my content because Scott and I are sharing this 50 minutes and we wanna open up for questions. I think a lot about private spaces and domestic labor, such as the monotony of chores, including meal prepping, laundry, paying bills. I do it every month, and I think I'm gonna do it for the rest of my life, like paying bills, paying the rent, and that's like crazy to think about. Every week I do the same stuff over and over again, so work all week, get through it, try to feed myself here and there, sometimes I don't even do that. And Sundays are meal prep, where I get ready for work and the week and so on and so forth. And so, like I'm sure so many of you do, I also have the emotional labor that comes with that, such as anxiety, worry, self-care. I think a lot about my friends, like, are my friends okay? When was the last time any of you called your mom, right? Is she doing okay? What are the basics of the skincare routine? I was at my friend's house and she puts on essence of snail on her face to keep her looking younger. That's crazy. So, I don't understand it, right? So, and just the usual, like, everyday things, like showering and brushing my teeth, sometimes that can be, just the monotony of that feels like a lot. And so the home is where we explore and contemplate, and the place that I'm most honest with myself, and therefore its elements and motifs are a large part of the work. My experiences with the economy today and insecurities that come along with it are much like many other people around me. Young people of today have a unique experience where wages remain unmoved despite inflation and tariffs. Student debt is at an all-time high with unemployment rising, and there is a serious lack of access to affordable health care that affects millions of Americans. Sorry to bring it down. Yeah, we'll get there. And so my relationship with my friends and family are directly impacted by my ability to work and study and thrive in a male-led economy. My relationships with my body and my femininity are based on these constructs that were largely established by men and women who have come before me and I don't know. In my relationship with my partner, I carry our issues and concerns as we navigate our lives together and its ups and downs and ebbs and flows. I also think about my roles in society as an educator, a partner, a friend, a woman, all of these things that I'm imprinting onto the people around me, for better or worse. And so I try my best to be thoughtful when I'm making and bringing art into the world and educating people and continuing to educate myself on those things while I'm making. So I'm making art that deals with the home and these personal spaces, and so what a better place to find stuff to make art but from estate sales or thrift stores, and I do a lot of sourcing from those places. So a couple years back, I bought this giant, I was at this thrift store, this local thrift store, and I found this box of women's stockings, and it was one of those things where, like, when you're shopping at a thrift store and you see a thing and you're like, I don't know why I need this, but I'm gonna buy it and then I'll circle back later, right? And so it's actually kind of toxic because I'm one of those people that also just throws everything away. So I like to buy things and then also get rid of them and then just like push back for it all the time. But with the stockings, I was really intrigued at the range of fabricated skin tones and textures that they held, but also their intended purpose, right? So to constrict and transform, conceal our bodies. And so I'm in my studio and trying to, like, I'm in grad school as well, so like, and it's the pandemic, and I don't know what's going on, and I'm lonely and I'm away from home, and but I have to keep making, right? We're in school for this. And so I began stuffing them with a mixture of like pillow stuffing and this raw cotton I had, exaggerating them in some and more lightly in others. I was stretching and knotting the stockings as I went, not really like knowing what I was doing, but like continuing to make and just like get to a point with it where I was like, oh, this is weird. And so the result was this giant mass of indiscernible soft forms that resembled parts of a human body. Like, think limbs, intestines, breasts. And so I've used these forms across multiple mediums: drawings, embroidery work, sculpture, various photo processes that you'll see. And so I began using them to create soft sculptures and still lifes that incorporated more domestic items, such as the curtain tassels that you see. This is a plant stand, different jewelry and pearls that I would embellish with them. And so where am I? And so the work was primarily made up of these utilitarian materials and fabrics used in these lower and middle classes that make up the majority, or like at least that I am, like those are the people that I interact with the most and think about the most, right, that class. So working with items that are from those people. And so I think also about accessibility, right? It's expensive to make art, as we all know. And so how do, like when I go to these thrift stores and I'm sourcing all of this material, like I was printing on paper for the longest time, and a sheet of BFK is, I mean, if you go to an art store, at least $10, right? And so that got expensive like really quickly, right? And I was like, but I want to keep making, I want to work large, I want to do all of these things. And so I was also interested in textiles and going, so I would find like big white sheets at the thrift store and cut them up and make prints on those, and then cut those up and sew them together. And so having more, like, being able to actually afford to keep making that way. And so I began documenting myself, interacting with the soft sculptures, and found that the performance aspects held a lot of artistic opportunities. As you can see, I typically, like when I'm working in the studio, if I do something or I'm making something and I'm like, oh, that's really weird, that's fucked up, it's probably good, like I'm in a good headspot with it, right? Where I'm like, ooh, I need to keep making this. And so in an attempt to hone in on those visual qualities of the performances, I began documenting myself doing things such as balancing them on my head, breastfeeding them. I would stuff them into small spaces, and take pictures of them, or have my friends at least take pictures. pictures of them, bless their hearts. And so I'm interacting with these unrecognizable forms that inadvertently become extensions of my body, right? Or it's fat, or it's innards, and blurring this line between reality and fictions. And the compositions make the purpose of the forms more unclear. They could be perceived as extensions of my body or invasions. Am I fighting with them, or am I complying with them? Are we working together? And so in turn, it's creating this narrative of overgrowth and carrying of these forms that is engaging in heightened awareness of the body, thinking about these notions of burden again, and vulnerability and accumulation, and all of those things that we experience in our own personal private spaces. And again, kind of paralleling the emotional and financial and societal burdens that I just decide to take on and carry with me, right? So at the same time I'm doing these lumps, I'm also looking at old vintage linens in antique stores. I've always kind of collected them. I've always loved them as like items. At first I was mostly interested in their decorative patterns and how they naturally create a frame, right? Simply, I do a lot of embroidery work at home, and so simply as this natural frame for the embroidery work. But many of these linens come with their own memories, such as stains or rips that I found intriguing in terms of mark making and the history that each linen had. And so the original use of the linens suggested this past intimacy with our own bodies, whether that be, you know, a tissue, the act of consoling someone, right? Or a napkin that would wipe sweat or food off your face, or even just like these, like the pink one, like a table setting thing, and thinking about the ritual of setting prepared food onto them and the intimacy of like preparing food and bringing like the ritual of coming together and eating food together and ingesting the food. And so the dated patterns and these materials that I'm collecting were speaking to this antiquated connotations of the material. And then my perceived former roles of these discarded linens, and then the people ultimately that handled and cared for them, right? Who was the woman that had this before me? And so I enjoy using these repurposed textiles and items specific to the home, and I have a installation in the gallery now. So I also collect bed sheets, table linens, pillow stuffing, lace curtains because of these preconceived roles in intimate nature. But with these distinct textiles, we can find ourselves doing things, really intimate things, such as sleeping in them, concealing ourselves, wiping our tears. And so this direct contact that they have with our body leaves this perpetual memory that doesn't always necessarily leave a physical mark, right? Like if I cry into something, like maybe it's washed away, but that memory of that tear is still there. And so while some of the items show these notable stains or rips or marks that show that interactions, others existed like unmarred, right? Still holding that notion of human touch. Like think about a baby blanket, right? And how we wrap our babies in these blankets like for months, if not years, right? And then like you go away off to college and your mom puts it in your special box, like that piece of fabric is still really important. Or that weird shawl that your grandma crocheted or knitted you, and you don't necessarily, like at the end of the day, it's just fabric or material, but you, like your grandma touched every single fiber of that thing as they were making it. And so thinking about these linens and what they were doing for me. And so many of the linens either had embroidered designs from their former owners, these stains from use, others so delicate that they may have been purchased for a special occasion, but it's long past, and that was maybe the only time it was seen. And so with that, I began thinking about the idea of unintentionally passing down these linens, like a collaboration between myself and the past generation of the person that had it before me. And so then thinking through that, like thinking through more about what the woman was like that maybe owned this before I came along and it got here. How are we the same and how are we different, right? Probably really different. Why did she even get rid of this thing that it's an estate sale? Did she also hate paying bills every month and doing her laundry and bitch about brushing her teeth every single day? Who knows, right? And so, and like being in estate sales, right, where I'm going into these people's houses, like now here I am rummaging through the things in her home that she loved, right? And like, why am I able to do that? Probably because she's passed, but you know. It's like kind of this crazy collaboration or like this passing down of these things, right? These items that somebody once loved that now I take on, right? And so from different starting points, such as generational wealth or even trauma, economics, educational backgrounds, we can think about family dynamics, eating disorders, you name it, comes these common frustrations as these burdens and conflicts that are unintentionally passed down through generations as now mine to bear and confront, and then now to pass down to somebody else, right? So eventually this work is also going to decay or find its way somewhere else, or someone's gonna buy it or whatever, and then like the history and that pass down of those things in these conversations. While maybe these conflicts have evolved or changed over time, similarities such as politics and legislation policing women's autonomy over our bodies and identities and occupational segregation still remain. But you know, we can also think about how love and joy and anger, confusion, resentment also remain, right? And what is that through line that can connect me and these other generations and bring us more together at a time where maybe our country and these different generations are so polarized, right? And so while creating, I think about what former generations of women's experiences with life was and how it parallels my experiences today. I think about that through like the motive making, right? The embroidery work and the history of textiles with women as well. And how did it not? And so by creating work that questions these perceived gender roles and experience, maybe I can find resolve in my own and decisions that maybe others have made knowingly or unknowingly on my behalf that have affected me and led me here today, whether that's for better or worse. So in my newest ideation of this work, I'm continuing to think through the motifs of lace and doilies and build my own soft sculptures. Is it working? Okay. I've never done a video on it. It's crazy. It literally says play the video, Lou. So so lace is an interesting textile in that it holds a close relationship to the intimacies of the domestic space. It's a complex tile in that it's the only fabric that represents both chastity and debauchery, right? So the fabric is found in doilies, wedding dresses, tablecloths, but it's also found in lingerie and undergarments and bras. And so this fabric can be considered a representation of both purity, but also like feminine sexual desires, right? And so like the butting up of these two things. So I've been going in and making these illustrator files inspired by the designs that are found on these linens and tablecloths, and then cutting them into these big doilies that you can see in the gallery space. You know, if I had the whole hour, we could go into it a little bit more, but they're also inspired by old Catholic prayer cards that have been given throughout, like in my family. My mother is Catholic and my aunts, and so the collecting of those cards as people pass and different events that we've gone to. And so I thought it was kind of this interesting like trading card in a way for me to now collaborate with. So working on Empty Mountain with Scott has been quite a process, right? And I really love the way Steph explained it. Exploring our own individual concerns, so mine with these inherited expectations placed on women, and his with systems of transmission and maybe transformation, and can overlap in these really quiet but meaningful ways. And so at first glance, our work might seem very different, right? But what connects us is this shared interest in how this meaning travels, right? And thinking about the linens and how like they're passed down, right? Through, whether that be time, through objects, through language, through our bodies. And we're both dealing with fragments, right? Or traces, the idea of traces left behind from people before us, that he'll talk about more. But for me, it's about confronting the weight of the generational experience, what's passed down to me, intentionally or not. And for Scott, it's the distortion that happens when something moves through space and coding, and he'll tell you more about it. But there's a sense of loss in both of our practices and thoughts, right? It can be kind of this somber experience when like we're thinking through the work, but there's also this kind of persistence, right? Like something's still like holding on, we're still trying to like communicate. And so we're thinking about Empty Mountain being the space where those echoes could kind of meet, right? It's a site that's named, but it's empty, right? And haunted, but familiar. And so it's been a pleasure working with him. And now like having the work be in the same room, like we'd had conversations about it and showing together, and I was like, oh, like this will be fun, we'll see how it goes. But now the work is in the same space, and we've had conversations the last couple of days about how like it really does, it's really meeting together in a meaningful way for the exhibition. So that's been a lot of fun. So before I let him actually come up here and talk about those things, I'm gonna end with this quote that I feel like embodies me and what I think I'm trying to say with the work. Feminist writer and women's advocate, Courtney Martin says, "We are the girls with anxiety disorders, filled appointment books, 5-year plans. We take ourselves very, very seriously. We are the peacemakers, the do-gooders, the givers, the savers. We are on time, overly prepared, well-read and witty, intellectually curious, always moving. We pride ourselves on getting as little sleep as possible and thrive on self-deprivation. We drink coffee, a lot of it. We are on birth control, Prozac, and multivitamins. We are relentless, judgmental with ourselves, and forgiving to others. We never want to be as passive-aggressive as our mothers, and never want to marry men as uninspired as our fathers. We are the daughters of feminists who said, you can be anything, and we heard, you have to be everything. And so, thanks again, Stephanie, the gallery crew, Naomi, Olivia, Tyler, Shelby for her wicked graphic design work for the exhibition. It was amazing. Getting us up here and having a wonderful time and showing us a good time. And I'm excited to see you guys for the exhibition tonight and the Art Hub.
All right. Well, that's a really tough act to follow. Because, I have to echo the comments that Lou made about, seeing our work in this situation together and kind of how, you can assume what's going to happen, right? I mean, especially as you make work and you kind of get into the swing of what that feels like and responding to it, you have a pretty good idea of what's going to happen next or how two things might get smashed together. But it's been really enlightening to see the work come together in the way that it has. And really exciting and invigorating, right? And some other words that I could probably tell you if I had a thesaurus up here, but I don't. So I'm Gregory Scott Cook. You can just call me Scott, but I use the full thing because, it sounds more impressive or something. I don't know. No one has ever called me Gregory in my entire life. My mom didn't even call me Scott. I'm not actually going to tell you what my mom called me, but Gregory Scott Cook is me. And I'm a lot of different things, and you're going to see that here because we are going to blast through this thing pretty quick once it gets rolling. So I hope you're ready. It's a little like a roller coaster. We're going to crank up, and then we're just going to go. All right? So I teach It's a big part of my identity as a maker, and you're going to see that through a bunch of the images here. But I also think that it's really important to think about, once again, some of the things that Lou kind of prefaced, our personal histories, right? Our locational histories, and then like what that does to us, right? As people, what is the residue of a place doing to you right now? I am so kind of like interested and excited that we're in this particular building in this moment, because it feels just right. The texture, the creaking as I move my feet on this floor, are all those like echoes of history, right? That are doing something textural to my life in this moment, right? And so I kind of like want to give you guys the call to action well before the end of the presentation, right? To just pay attention to that, right? Because it is something you can constantly respond to and be in conversation with. And hopefully that leads to better outcomes, right? Or at least more thoughtful ones. Cool. So, hi. So like I said, I teach design. I did not start my career in teaching or in making as a designer. I actually started off as a printmaker. And so we'll talk more about that here in a second. But I am from here. And so here it's kind of dark, but there's some water over there. I'm from the Blood River alcove off Kentucky Lake. And so that like dotted circle is my childhood home. This one right here is like a rock quarry that I really like. And then the one up there is where I had a dream when I was 6 that all these Frankensteins were in this UFO and it landed and they tried to get me and it was horrifying. So those are really important locations that I've marked. Lou and I, in preparing for this show, were working on stuff. It was late and we turned on Jaws. Clint from Jaws comes up on the screen. She's like, ooh, I see a lot of you and him. I see a lot of him and you. You guys have a thing. And then like 10 minutes later, Richard Dreyfuss comes up and starts talking about like all this dumb technology that he's going to use to get this shark when this guy just said, I can get your shark. So, she was like, actually, maybe I see a lot of you and him too. I was like, I think that's fair. I think that's totally fair. We can be many things, right? 2 things can be true. This is the reality of who I am. So this is me on my first day of kindergarten. And also, if any of you guys saw me running around yesterday in my overalls, starts my very clear and long-standing relationship with that particular garment, all right? So this is me walking away from my mom's car that my dad painted to look like, this Pringles can or something. It's got this whole thing going on. And I'm just not excited about it. And I had that relationship with school for a really long time. And then I started looking at things from a different angle. And that happened when I started my education in art. Because while I struggled with I didn't struggle with concepts, I struggled with the organization and the structure, right? And when I got into art, they gave me all of these open-ended questions, right? And then asked me if I was a bad enough dude to solve them, I guess, right? And that was much more meaningful and interesting to me. I was like, oh yeah, of course. Like, let's do this, let's do that. You're gonna see a little bit later, in at least one spot, where I'm using a drawing machine to make my work. And as a person who never passed an art class, or not an art class, never passed a math class, yeah, hey, you guys might have that opinion at the end of this too. No, as a person who never passed a math class, like without some extreme struggle, I surprised myself when somebody walked up to me at an exhibition and they were like, oh, that's awesome. Like, how did you figure this particular part or piece out? And I was like, oh, I just I just sat down and figured it out. I was like, I needed to translate coordinates from radial coordinates to Cartesian coordinates and back. And they were like, oh, that's calculus. And I was like, huh? What? And so I looked and was like, oh yeah, that's calculus. Okay, cool. I can do calculus now. I understand it. So there are always those voices that are going to pop up. This is me teaching during the pandemic, which was its own crazy situation. I had to become a stream teacher, and I taught from thousands of miles away. You know, I also think this is pretty clearly representative of who I am as a person. This was just me getting ready for class one day. It was pretty cool. Yeah. Right? I think we all got there at some point, right? But you're seeing in the background there a bunch of remnants of, I was teaching a lot of web design at the time, and certainly like it both was informed by my work and bled into my work. But in order to get any kind of picture of what's going on here, we have to kind of rewind way, way, way back. So I started off my education as an artist as a printmaker. But that's not even the beginning, because really I went to school for music. And when I showed up day one, I looked around, you know, I made my way to my classes, started talking to people, and they're like, yeah, you got a couple options here. You can either be a performance major, and I was like, I suck, so that's not gonna happen. You could be a composition major, and I was like, well, they'll let you write anything? And they're like, no, it has to be like musical. So, okay. Not gonna do that, I'm no good at that either. And then they're like, or you could teach, and I was like, absolutely not. There's no way, I will never teach. Life has a way of showing you where you're very wrong about certain things, and that was one of the things I was very wrong about. This is also a self-portrait, you can tell by the beard. Right? Come on. This is where my print work kind of was as I transitioned into grad school. And grad school is where a lot of things shook up for me. So to the side, I was doing lots of things with sound and music and electronics, but they were all just kind of like stuff I did, right? And I hope like talking to the majority of you guys, it's like, I mean, it looks like you guys are mostly student-aged, right? That I can be a little bit of a example case that like, be open to figuring out what you want to chew on for the rest of maybe forever, okay? Because it might not be accounting, and that's okay, right? So I was in grad school. I'd gone to be a printmaker, and I had the studio visit with this art critic, and he walked into my studio, and he kind of walked by everything that I had up on the wall. He walked over to the window in my studio, and it was like a third-floor studio, and kind of had a horizon line. I went to grad school in Lincoln, Nebraska, so there's plenty of sky there, right? And I had drawn like the sun on it and then a line for the horizon and was like, go to sleep and work more, like in my finger in the dust on the window. And he walked in and was like, this is a really cool piece. And I was like, what? He was like, no, let's talk about it for a minute. And so we talked about it. And that was a really confrontational moment where I had to open up. And I was like, oh, okay, so it's really not like all about technique or skill. It's really about like, what the hell are you thinking about, right? And how do you observe it? And what do you do in your actions toward that observance, right? Like, what do you build? What do you take apart? How do you make it work? So I was flipping through some books and I found this note from a party. And it's like this game, you know, like a party game you would play. It says, this is a good party, Velma. And I thought to myself, there's nothing worse in the world than someone making you play an icebreaker game at a party that tells you how good their party was, right? You're supposed to tell them back, right? Like, well, this is a great party, Velma. It's like it's a no-fail scenario, right? Like Velma has set your ass up. And so I could think of nothing worse in the world. So what I did was I made a little fan and I programmed it to blow out Morse code. And so it would make this note flit around right on the wall, and it would blink out, flap out in Morse code, hell is other people. And so it was like this initial reaction to like coding information, like giving extra information where I could, or imbuing something with more data in a way, but also responding to its history, right? This note of this perceived party that I was never at and have no access to. So that was the beginning of a long, long road of lots of different, experimentation. I've worked a lot with encoding information. This is the first few bars of Satellite of Love by Lou Reed. but turned into a weaving pattern that I then wove on a jacquard loom into a wool like kind of egg that was full of, it was hidden electronics. I wanted to kind of hide that it did something. It was in a totally dark room except for one light on the top of it, and if you picked it up, it had accelerometers in it that would move sound around in a surround sound system, right? And so to me, it was like a combination lock that you had no idea what the combination was, right? And really, there wasn't one, right? Your interaction with it is both the combination and the lock, right? Like you have to figure out for yourself whether or not that is meaningful, right? But the sound was very textural and it was meant to evoke location or place or time. And I had people walk out of that with an experience, right? And they would talk to me and they were like, that was really interesting. It felt like this to me or this to me. And invariably, they're all different, right? Because we have this like, wide tapestry of what we think is going on in the world. And we're the only ones experiencing it at any one given point in time, right? So again, there is no combination to unlock. You are the lock and the combination. I made a bunch of work over time about transmission. Lou mentioned that. Transmission is a really important concept to my work because not only do these objects travel through time and lose or gain meaning, but so do just our basic communications with each other, right? I made multiple shows about the idea of path loss, and path loss is a engineering term that has to do with like the amount of signal that's lost because of things like terrain, right? So you're sending out a radio signal, but you're sending it through a mountain and it can't make it all the way through, right? There's an acceptable loss there. Objects, people, stories, they all have that same kind of issue, right? So I really got a feel for combining objects in these ways that would enhance that idea of, their relationships with each other in a space, right? But also the fact that they all have some kind of unique history, right? Whether I know what it is or not. This is a meteorite, but it was set up as an antenna, and it was broadcasting sound into the space that was picked up by this world radio. So it was even from across the room, you walking through the room would affect that path loss between point A and point B, so you could become involved, right? We're gonna skip through a bunch of stuff here. This is in that rock quarry. This is a piano wire strung between two trees and then tuned to just below a concert A, which is kind of our home pitch for concert musicians. That's what you tune to when you hear the cacophony, right? And so it was almost home, right, but not quite. And this was on a trip back during grad school. And so I built these electronics. It was a piece called Singer, and it would vibrate that piano wire at that note, right, into space for no one, really. It's a rock quarry in western Kentucky. There was no one around. I had to kind of be conscious, though, right? Like, you don't want a piano wire at, like, neck level in a place where people drive four-wheelers, right? So I took it down immediately, right? But it was something that I thought did a really great job of both being that echo right in that place and kind of explaining that, while I had all these interests in all of these different parts and pieces of electronics or, systems, that I could put them together in a way that could do more or mean more, right? So that led into a project where I was working directly with transmission. So I was having my mom actually take photos of objects I picked up as a kid, and then I was stitching those photos into 3D models, and then making them faceted, and then unfolding them, and then recreating them. And so it was a whole system of like, I picked up this rock when I was 6, and it's still sitting at home somewhere. And now I have this giant version of it that has had to be shot through, time and space. And of course, I'm going to lose something. If you put them next to each other, they have a vague resemblance, right? But that vague resemblance might be the essence of the object, right? That might be the thing that makes it that thing. At least that's the question, right? That's what we ask. So I ended that whole kind of series of work with having her take photos of the telephone pole outside my bedroom window as a child, and then I unstitched that and recreated it at 1-to-1 scale. And so it's put together in space. So in theory, right, I transported that thing from outside my bedroom window as a child to this gallery space somewhere else, right? Now, is it worse for wear? Sure, it looks kind of like shit. It's supposed to, right? I recreated it with a bunch of materials that were meaningful to me. My dad did bodywork on cars when I was a kid, and it's been a huge influence on my work and kind of what I do in the world. And so there's lots of Bondo and resin and clear coat and all kinds of great stuff stuck into this piece. So there are tons of details there. So I mentioned working with technology. Again, that was a facet of my work that really only expanded. And so as I got my hands on new tools that could make things, I tried to figure out how I might do that in unconventional ways, right? So I built a hanging pen plotter and made lots of drawings from lots of digital detritus, right? Like what could I find and how broken could I make it? I've had the opportunity to teach a lot, and that has been a real driver for my work because it allows me to both share things that I'm interested in and have knowledge of, but also respond to what people are bringing me. So this is just a little image from a sound class that I taught where we had no equipment, right? And so we had to build our equipment from scratch. So I had all my students build little amps and contact microphones, and then they could bring in whatever recording device they wanted to record on. This was a student who brought in a micro cassette recorder, which you guys probably have not seen before, and he hadn't had any experience of before this class. But what was lovely about it was I got them all together in one spot. We were able to build these tools, and then we were able to use them in our practice, right? And that's something that echoes throughout my way of making things. I always want to be able to create my own tools, right, to do my own problem solving. So they all look like Ghostbusters, like walking around campus with these things, like sticking them on stuff to like get sound recordings. So it was great. And they all were different, right? They were all unique in their own way. Love the feed me. This was another student that I worked with who was working with conductive paint. And so we cut these giant vinyl stencils and she painted this conductive paint onto these panels. And then we hid all the electronics behind it, but created basically giant interactive touch panels. She was an illustrator and animator. And so she projection mapped onto them. And when you would touch them, it would trigger animations or sound. So it did some really interesting kind of stuff. Tool building, again, super big. The whole concept of access, right, to be able to ask these questions and kind of play in a space where you get access to these tools is something I try to afford. So I've built lots of DIY machines that make things. I love to share that information through workshop activity. And so we had a workshop earlier today where we looked at bookbinding, but in the past I've also done things like how do you take a, less than a cent microcontroller or IC chip and make it do something interesting. In this case, I taught a room full of like elementary educators and just members from the community how to make a light-powered, synth. So it would make sound. It would make music based on light. So really fun. My worlds collide often. And so, my interest in those kind of like more aggressive, let's say, disciplines and things like engineering or electronics work, right? Smash into my history as a printmaker, and this is where I was designing my own circuit boards and then using the print shop to etch them and then drill my leads out and make multiples because I can't help myself. So these were pieces I called satellites, MISU. And so I made 20-something of them. And so light would come in and they would just chirp, right? But it became their own beautiful objects, right, by themselves. And the process of making them was based on this historic kind of like activity in my own life. The calculators we used in 4th grade in Kentucky, right? I knew that I had to buy those and then turn them into a display that would, show whatever I wanted to. In this case, Mark of the Beast. So those evolved over time. That was the circuit board specifically for that. And of course, multiples. So it's at this point where I start to get heavier into the ideas that like code can help us make new and interesting things. So this was part of a piece that I built where it generates kind of a new human-ish creature, right? It does it 8 times a second. And, mathematically, there's like almost no possibility for a repeat there, at least not for a very, very long time. And so you get to see these guys get kind of like popped into existence and popped out of existence almost immediately. And that was kind of thought-provoking to me. It was fun to kind of think about that as a horrifying fact. And so, of course, I had to build a machine that did it by itself, and it would constantly break and then get fixed and break and get fixed. So all of this experimentation drives, again, access and engagement with tools, and then me kind of figuring out what that means for people who I teach things to. And so this is me teaching a like scaling an object kind of lesson. And so I had these little rubber hands. I was like, well, I need a cup that's in scale with the little rubber hands, right? And so I took apart a Starbucks cup. I did the math on, how you would scale that, and then I scaled it, right? So you guys will see some stuff in the show, in the Gilson. Here's some 3D printed screws that I made. And so I 3D printed the screws and the bits to screw them in, right? So they're a closed system, like you can use it like any other screw. And then I got them manufactured in, brass and steel, so I could actually use them. And so you'll see those all through the show in the Gilson there and lots of my pieces at this point. I got so much stuff here I can't even talk about because it's just massive. This is me playing with a CNC router for one of the first times, an open source one that I helped build. And again, it's a relationship that bounces back and forth between the work. I'm very thankful that Lou gave you guys a little more information about some of the core tenets of what was going on in that work, because I'm just showing you images at this point. But the relationship, I think, feeds that transmission. You guys will see down in the Gilson our statement, and that, I think, it should give you a very good idea of what's going on there. I'm just going to flash through a couple things because they're down there so you can see them. Scale model of the moon that's a particular distance from a globe, and that thing has some interesting things in it, so you can look that up on our statement. Some like kintsugi-esque work with found sculptural objects, and just creating spaces, which is common. No more meteorites. So I'm gonna get around to that. So I am a designer alongside being a studio artist, and so I got the opportunity to help brand a record store in my hometown. Lou and her partner Tim just so happened to own this record store, and so that has been a really lovely experience, kind of bonding, building this thing. There's Lou. And so getting to see things come to be reality, right, through these tools that we get to use to make all kinds of different things has been really gratifying. So you'll do things you never expected to do. And I'm sure my carpenter grandfather would be very, very proud of me to see that I'm applying some of his hard work in totally unexpected ways. And it's all for the sake of community, right? We can have events there. You can't really see what's going on, but people are having a good time, I promise. I make work in conversation with my daughter, who lives apart from me. And so we talk every day on the phone, and we use these kind of like drawing apps, right, to draw with each other and finish each other's work. And so you'll see this guy in the show. Like this is a couple of years old now, and she would hate me for showing you that. But I love her little Dutch boy haircut. So this was a drawing we made together, and it makes an appearance in the show. So go check that piece out, and there's a reprise of the moon. The newest work in the show, again, is born out of that relationship between Lou and my work, right? And so this is kind of the first time we've smashed those things together. And so I would invite you to kind of ask your own questions about what's going on there. Bye. Thanks.
We can take a couple questions. Does anyone have any immediate questions? We can ask them. Oh, Shelby has a question.
Huh? By hand. Yeah. Yeah, so I just came up with a design for it and I built it. I was teaching web design, so. It's got a lot of parts and pieces. I'm sad that GoDaddy, as a hosting provider, I don't know, maybe they'll sue me if I say this is slander, but they did a really bad job migrating it to my new host. So I lost a lot of it, but almost all of it.
Do you have a special screwdriver for your screws?
So the bit is just like the common hex shaft bit, so it'll go into any screwdriver. I usually use one from IKEA, but yeah, the bit itself is the special part. Yeah.
Keep going, Steph. Where is it? There, it is pictured.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So the bits. Yep. So that's both of them. Yeah, they're in conversation there.
Do you sell the screws?
I have thought about making a set, like you would buy at a hardware store, of the bits and then, a little box of the screws. They're more expensive than you would probably want. But someday I do plan to sell the screws. I got to do it. Yeah. Now I feel like I'm the only one answering questions because I hopped back
I didn't
up.
make any screws.
Oh, okay. All right.
You should come back to where the camera is.
Oh, I guess I should, yeah. Well, you want to come up here too? God, come on.
A few more minutes. We
Yeah.
can take a few more questions. And then
And back there.
What's one of the biggest connections you guys have seen through your work together?
I think the idea of I'll do it. I think the conversations of like passing down, right? And like he didn't really get into a ton of like the content behind his work, but like it does talk a lot about like memory and like how like and then me with the linens and how like we start with these objects and then like he comes by a broken deer sculpture and then breaks it and then puts it back together and like same thing like with me and my linens, like these beautiful linens that I put these weird pictures and stuff on and like how like our interactions with these things come together. And then like when we're in the space, like I was doing this, it's this table installation and how like now this table installation and when you look at the space, we have like the globe that is then interacting with like these soft form sculptures and then just past that's the deer and like these terrains, right? Like a mountain are happening and so like visually it's also making these nice connections as well.
Yeah.
If you want to add to that.
Well, yeah, no, I 100% agree. I think that's kind of been the most striking part of it, has been seeing how it informs, like the work informs each other. And certainly like that idea of like transmission through time or space or meaning and inheritance, right? I think that because those are so primary to the work that it sits really well together. It's a melange.
Yes.
take probably one more question.
Ooh, then someone
Got one.
who gets to be the special.
Over here.
Oh,
Which piece is the hardest one you can think of?
like the hardest to make or the hardest? Okay.
Like the longest or
Oof.
general?
I don't know, my laser cut pieces took a minute.
That's true. That I think it brings up a really good point, though, because we were talking about this yesterday when we were talking with some people who were having some of their first critiques about how to critique and the idea of like self-critique. I feel like the hardest piece to make is every one, right? Like the next one is the hardest one every time. Because once it gets made and you walk away from it and you walk back to it, you're either going to feel good about that or feel bad about that in very specific ways. You have to be able to evaluate that, right? It's like, what about this is making me feel like I'm sad that I ever made this, right? Or what about this is making me feel like, oh, I never want to leave the room this is in.
Or
right?
I think like success for myself is like, what's the next thing? Like I'm like, even while I'm making, I'm constantly telling myself, okay, like what piece do I make that responds to this? Or like how do I evolve this, right? And I don't necessarily always have the answer. It kind of comes as I make. But like you said, it's like answering those questions is that hard part, right? And then when we get down to the actual making, honestly, like that's the fun part. Like being in the studio and getting it done and taking calculators and taking them apart and putting them back
Figuring
together
that out,
so they say 666, you know?
Well, they also said Go to Hell and Hillbilly Hellhole, and they said a lot of really good stuff, actually. Yeah.
So I think that's like maybe the fun part. I think the hard part is like I think the emotional labor of like figuring all of that out and what you want the work to say and all of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so it's more the spirit of the question, right? Like a lot of this stuff took time, but the hardest thing is always the next thing. Yeah. Is that it?
We don't have any more.
All right, yeah.
We're
Thank
done.
you all. If you haven't signed in for
Cut
our
off.
forum, make sure you do. Let's clap for Lou and Scott.
To support the ESU Art Forum program, please visit emporia.edu/art. Click on the Events tab, scroll down to the Art Forum link and click. Then scroll down to the Support Art Forum button and click. Finally, choose your donation level and click on the Continue button to complete the process. We appreciate your support.